I'm going to be a mess.
I've got tissues, don't worry.
Oh, that's good. Where are they? You're just interested in where you came from, especially as you get older, aren't you? Like, who am I?
That's just lovely, isn't it?
That's a stroke of luck. And that's also really nice and sort of honest, isn't it? Right.
And he was massively famous during his time, yeah.
Wow.
There is a record the likes of which I've never seen before.
Hi there, I'm Alex Jones and I'm so excited to welcome you to Questions and Ancestors, brought to you by Ancestry. Now, we've all got unanswered questions in our family stories, so if, like me, you're curious about where you've come from, if you believe that checking in the rearview mirror is essential for helping us carve a path in life, then you are going to love this podcast. Everyone has got myths in their own family history. For example, well, apparently my great-grandfather died in a very dramatic fashion on the steps of a local cinema, but who knows if that's true. Across this series, we are going to help our guests uncover the family history that has made them them. But it's not all about the past. Now, armed with a family files, we'll find out how these discoveries might impact their future, shaping their choices, perspectives, and the legacy they want to leave behind. Helping me is Ancestry's senior genetic genealogist, Laura House, who will be explaining exactly what a team has found. So joining me today is one of the funniest women on television. She was one of the creators and stars of the Emmy Award-winning Smack the Pony, and she's appeared in everything from Miranda to Veep and the Bridget Jones movies. I'm thrilled that my guest today on Questions and Ancestors is Sally Phillips. Sally, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks
so
for
lovely
having me.
to
So
see
nice
you.
to see you too.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So who is the historian in your house?
My dad's side of the family, there are historians, though not very closely related. There is someone about 4 prongs along on the family tree who did a family tree back to 15 whatever.
Wow.
And there are lots of stories about... So my grandfather taught chemistry to Crick, Francis Crick, so that's really good that he didn't put him off chemistry and he could go on to discover the double helix. And then there's a whole load of chemists all the way down on that side, lots of Oxford dons and stuff. My mum's side of the family, my cousin Mark has a box of stuff. But
what sort of stuff, Sally?
Well, we don't know. He said, do you want me to go through the box? And I said, that sounds like it. If it's the kind of box I'm imagining, that's going to take you a long time and you've got young kids. So don't worry, I'll come and do the podcast.
Yeah.
But no one really knows. So we've got my mum's side. My mum never really spoke about her dad, who died when I was 2, I think. And so this conversation doing this podcast, I asked people and I found out that he was one of 12 or 13 and that he'd been in the RAF, but that's about as much as we know. Born in Ingleby in North Yorkshire. And my mother's mother is the reason I'm here, because we found out at her funeral that she was adopted, and we didn't know that. And
wow.
It explained such a lot.
And how did you find out at the funeral?
Someone came up to my mother and said, your mother was very kind to me because I was adopted too. And
did you all go, what?
Yes. And then everyone went, it was that thing of that makes so much sense. Lots of things about May. Oh, she was incredibly warm, very, very loving. But I asked my cousin Jax, look, how would you describe Granny? And she said regal.
I like it.
And my mum said to me the other week, she said she thought she was nobody from nowhere. And so she felt she had to overcompensate. So she wore a lot of hats, really big hats. She sort of modelled herself on the Queen Mother, the late Queen's mother.
Yes.
And she really got stuck into contributing to the local community. So she became a magistrate and chairwoman of the Castleford Choral Society and the Castleford Girls Friendly Society. And all while working very, very hard. They had a grocer's shop that I remember her in, covered in flour with a big apron. And my mum said that she just worked incredibly, incredibly hard to send her and her siblings to school, to a grammar school.
She sounds like a woman with a lot of personality,
yes.
Somebody who was very busy all the time.
Yes.
And
my mum ended up doing a lot of the housekeeping because my granny was out speaking French and playing tennis.
Amazing.
And they didn't have the lifestyle for that. So I think that was pretty tricky for my mum, who was the eldest of 4, and she basically ran the home and the kids from a young age. But then she said to me, I think she thought her mother was adopted not because people wanted a kid, but because they wanted a servant in the shop. So that is my mother's feeling about what happened. So from a very young age, she was just working in the shop, and it started off as a cart that went around Castleford, and then they got an actual building, and they worked all hours, and it's just opposite the UK's first Asda. So it shut before the Asda opened to destroy it, but that's where it is, the Castleford Asda. That's basically where their shop was.
Now, this isn't just a podcast because, of course, this will become a digital record of your family history. And hopefully today you can add to that digital record, which is quite exciting, isn't it?
It certainly is.
So we're asking all of our guests to bring something.
Yeah.
So it can be something unexpected, a document that they need explaining, but you've chosen a video.
My cousin Mark found a video of May, who's our, who I'm here to find out about, on Yorkshire TV, wishing the Queen Mum a very happy birthday from the people of Castleford by reading out a poem in her best voice. And she's wearing one of the hats. It's not the most spectacular hat, but it's pretty extraordinary. And I think you'll get a bit of an idea of what she's like. That's
a sense of her.
Happy birthday, dear Queen Mother. Because like you, there is no other. You have fulfilled your own destiny in the way it was really meant to be. You blossomed into the greatest queen, a sense of duty we have seldom seen. So dedicated a monarch, wife and mother, a living symbol of peace, like none other.
You get a sense of her. I mean, she was much warmer and funnier than she appeared. She's obviously terrified. They weren't really airs and graces. They were, I'm not acceptable. So it's interesting that she kept it secret, even from her own children, that she was adopted, and that they only found out at the funeral. And she was very, very warm, very, very thoughtful, sometimes in a comic way. I remember going up to see her from university and I just turned vegetarian. And she said, welcome, welcome. I've made you 3 meats, Sally. She'd done a pork chop and a sausage and a bit of gammon.
Perfect. Perfect for a vegetarian.
Yeah, and a boiled potato. That was dinner. So she's very, very thoughtful. My uncle, when he got divorced, he moved in with her, and she's just very, very kind, I think, a very kind person. And I remember in the old people's home, the vicar ended up saying that he would go round and ask if people wanted prayer, and he would pray for her, and she was the only person who would turn around and start praying for him back, which I don't know if he welcomed that or not, but
I'm sure
it's a sign of how she was. She's a very generous person.
So what are you hoping that today will reveal, and what sort of information would you like to take back onto the family WhatsApp so you can fill some gaps?
Yes. Oh, well, we'd love to know. I think she had I don't know who said it. We have these sort of cousin meetups and someone will throw something in. You don't remember which year that happened and I don't remember who it was. But someone's saying that she thought she might have been a, aristocrat, illegitimate daughter of an aristocrat. But that was quite a common fantasy, I think.
And do you think it was a fantasy, something that she liked the idea of?
Well, I think that would probably be better than being the daughter of, some ne'er-do-well. And she lent into that with the hats, my cousin Jax said to describe her, she'd say that she was regal.
Basically,
like
dressed for the job you want.
Dressed for the job you want, that's it.
Isn't it?
That's it. So we just want to know a bit about her, where she came from, to know if there are other people out there that we're related to, I guess. And I just love this side of I love both sides of the family, but I feel very close to these cousins. And I feel particularly connected. So they're all boys on that side, apart from my cousin Jax. And so I feel very connected to my cousin Jax. And Granny spoilt us rotten. as the two girls. We'd always, when we went to stay there, we'd always try on our hats and then do handstands on the pocket square of garden. And she grew lots of roses and things like that. So, yeah, I can't wait to sit down with Jax over a cottage pie and
share the findings.
Yeah.
But I think the lovely thing is we've got quite a full picture now of who May was. I can
That's so
completely
exciting.
picture her in my mind. I'm sure Laura will be able to do the same. So it's time to welcome the key to this podcast is Ancestry Senior Genetic Genealogist is Laura House. Laura,
Hi, Laura.
Sally, Laura.
Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.
Laura, you'll be beside me throughout the series, helping to make sense of everyone's DNA tests and family histories. You've looked into everything and you've got some revelations for all of our guests, which is fantastic. So could you tease us, is there something particularly exciting in Sally's story?
There is a record the likes of which I've never seen before, with information in it that you never get. I've just never come across it before. And when I saw it, I was so excited. And I have to say, I'm so grateful to you for trusting us with this, because it was such a wonderful find and I can't wait to share it with you.
My goodness. Now, if I'm right, this is a baptism record, isn't it?
It is.
Tell us why this is significant then and important to the story.
So this is the baptism record of your grandmother, May.
I'm going to be a mess.
I've got tissues, don't worry.
Oh, that's good. Where are they? Yeah.
And I'm going to show this to you because I want you to have that moment of discovery like what I had when I first saw this document. And so what we're looking at is a Wesleyan Methodist baptism record. You will see, I've zoomed in.
Born March 25th, 08, Mary Elizabeth May. My mother's name is Elizabeth. My middle name is Elizabeth. Adopted by John Kirby. Mother's name, Rebecca Tilly Fletcher?
Yeah.
Fletcher. We knew that Fletcher was somewhere in there. My mother was saying, where does Fletcher come from? Fletcher was the name. Oh my word, Rebecca Tilly Fletcher.
So what makes this record unique, what I've never
Yeah.
seen before,
Yeah,
is that while John is her adoptive father,
yeah.
Rebecca is her birth mother. And I've never seen a baptism for an adopted child
Yes.
that names both the adoptive parent and the birth parent.
And the birth parent.
So does
Right.
that mean that the adoptive mum and the birth mum would have been present at the baptism?
Most likely, yes. So what this suggests is that the adoptive parents
Yeah.
wanted to maintain some sort of link between
Ah.
May and her birth mother.
Ah,
Because if, for example, May had ever been curious and had wanted to know more, she could have gone and looked at her own baptism register entry and she would have seen her mother's name right there.
wow. Rebecca Tilly Fletcher.
Yeah.
Goodness me. And so do you know what happened to Rebecca Tilly Fletcher?
I do.
Oh my word.
I do. I can talk to you about the adoptive parents and
Yeah.
then we'll move on to Rebecca.
Okay.
Should we start with John Kirby then and
Yes.
find out what his story was?
Yes. So on Christmas Day in 1899, a couple named John Kirby and Elizabeth Fletcher Thorpe. Fletcher unrelated to Rebecca, weirdly enough, just a coincidence.
Wow.
But they got married
Yes.
and they were a humble couple. John was a miner,
Yeah.
Elizabeth was a housewife.
Yeah.
And 9 years of their marriage passed and they had no children.
Right.
And we might assume from the fact that they adopted May that they wanted a family.
Yeah.
And this just wasn't happening for them.
Yeah.
Now, I suspect from this baptism that they knew Rebecca, the birth mother of May, from the Wesleyan Methodist congregation.
Yeah.
So Rebecca becomes pregnant at
Yeah.
18 years old.
Yes.
She's not married.
Yeah. And we don't know
She's-
who the dad is, of course.
We don't know who the dad is. There's no record of the dad. She's born to middle-class parents, and often in a middle-class family, there is more pressure to adopt out a child when you're unmarried. So this may have been a really difficult time for her. And John and Elizabeth adopted the baby.
And you think they knew each other then through the church community, hence why they were both at the baptism?
So standardised adoptions didn't take place until the 1920s. So at this time, adoptions were mostly informal arrangements. So they tended to be either someone that you knew You would
Yeah.
hand the baby to a family that you knew, or it would be arranged through your local doctor. So you would tell
Yeah.
the doctor, I want to adopt the baby out. The doctor would find a family, but there would be no document of this adoption.
Right.
So if it hadn't been for this decision to record Rebecca's name on the baptism record, we would have been at a total dead end here in terms of finding out who May's mother was. So they
Wow.
made just the most beautiful decision to include both sets of parents on this baptism so that there was a
Wow.
link between May post-adoption
Wow.
and May pre-adoption.
Wow.
That's just lovely, isn't it?
That's a stroke of luck. And that's also really nice and sort of honest, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. And in closed
And
adoptions...
it's also Rebecca wanting to
Yeah.
be recorded.
Yeah.
At 18, I mean,
Is that how old she was? 18?
18.
it's very young, isn't it?
Very young.
You know,
Yeah.
and to make a decision like that must have been so difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she worked as a nurse at this time.
Rebecca.
Yeah, Rebecca did. And so even with that job, because women were paid so little during
Yes.
this time, without the support of her family, she would have really struggled to support
Yes.
the baby on her own.
Gosh.
Yes.
So what else do we know then about Rebecca Fletcher?
There is evidence that Rebecca stayed in May's life for at least a few months after the adoption took place, because there's a very mysterious second baptism record in the same Wesleyan Methodist Church, a month or so after the first one, where the only named parent is Rebecca. So the adoptive parents aren't named on this record, but Rebecca is.
So she took her back.
That's what it looks like, yeah. That she took her back for a ceremony, just the two of them.
Do you think it was just for the ceremony? I suppose we'll never know. But was that a goodbye?
That's what it feels like, isn't it?
A second
Maybe.
baptism.
Yeah. I've never seen this.
Wow. Oh my
And
word.
we can only speculate because we don't know what was going on. We don't know if there was maybe an issue with the first baptism, which I don't know what that would be.
No.
But it feels like, because the adoptive parents aren't named on the second record, that she went back on her own.
It feels like maybe she wanted something intimate between her and her daughter before maybe handing her over fully.
But you don't think she would have maybe taken her back? Regretted it, taken her back? Does that not look like she wanted the adoptive parents not on the...
Maybe.
Well,
but then I suppose she went back, then May did go back to the adoptive parents, didn't she?
There's no evidence that May ever stays with Rebecca again in a permanent capacity. The next time we see May in a record is the 1911 census. Now, censuses were taken every 10 years from 1841 onwards, and they are absolutely essential records for family history because they give you a snapshot of a family's life. And all the England and Wales censuses from 1841 to 1921 are available on Ancestry, so you can trace the family through the decades. And so if we look at this 1911 census record, you can see May with her adoptive parents,
Right.
and she's still got her birth name.
And they put adopted daughter.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
So that's proof in a way, isn't it, that she did stay with them then?
Yeah.
Until she was at least 18?
They were her legal parents for her whole life.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow. Feels really mean that they put like adopted daughter rather than
It
just
does.
daughter.
These days it would be just daughter, I
Daughter,
guess,
yeah.
wouldn't it?
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because if we look at the next document, this is the 1921 census, so 10 years later,
Yeah.
Read it out, Sal.
and the way they've described her in this census has changed.
Yeah, they describe her as daughter.
Really?
Yeah, they do.
Maybe it was rules, though, was it? You know, around the earlier census that you had to specify, and maybe the rules had relaxed a bit 10 years later?
Well, people filled out these censuses themselves, so they were writing them out at home. And so I don't know if you remember doing the most recent census.
I do.
And
That was a lot of paperwork.
yeah, and I agonised over what to write in certain columns because I wanted to get it exactly right. And so there may have been an element of them talking to each other and saying, oh, should we claim that she's our daughter, or are we supposed to put adoptive daughter? So it may not have been intended to other her. It may have been more that they wanted to record accurate information. And interestingly, in 1911, she's got her birth name, exactly the name her mother gave her. And in 1921, they've added Kirby, her surname. So they've given her their surname by
Yes.
1921. So
Yeah.
she's assimilated into the
So it's
family.
adoption has just become official in 1920.
In 1926, I think,
Oh, I
adoption
see.
became official. So there's no legal framework for this yet, but they may have felt like she was more assimilated into their family by
So
this
it's
point.
interesting that he's still in the colliery.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's not true. Well, my mother feared that they adopted her to work in the shop. They adopted her as a baby.
Yeah, they adopted her as a baby.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
not true. So that's great.
It
so
is,
she
yeah.
wasn't like a slave, which was a fear, I think. But
I
this says
was-
colliery deputy out of work.
Yeah, so this was a tumultuous time
Yeah.
for people, working class people especially.
Yeah.
A lot of people were out of work during the 1921 census. So that's nothing unusual. But he has been promoted. So his last role was colliery deputy. So he has been promoted from minor to deputy. So he's moving up in the world. And I would suggest the fact that they were married for 9 years and had no biological children and then adopted May, to me,
Yeah.
that feels like a couple building a family.
Yes.
It really does.
Yeah.
And did they stay married?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's great to be able to know that she was wanted, that he was working, and she wasn't being brought in as a small... I sort of built up a picture of her being brought in as a small girl just to work in a shop.
Yeah, like Oliver Twist.
That's what my mother believed, I think. Partly also because of my grandmother's work ethic. I mean, she did not stop working. And my mother's the same. Yeah, she's one of those sort of northern women that gets up, the house is all clean, and she's made 2 curries by 7:15 and then went into work and did a full day and then came back and did more ironing and,
Yeah.
house spick and span.
Shall we talk a bit more about Rebecca
Yeah.
Yeah.
and find out a bit more about her?
I love the name Rebecca.
Yeah.
So do
And I
Right.
love the surname Tilly.
Yeah,
I love
Rebecca
it all.
Tilly Fletcher. So yeah, you don't often see Tilly as a legal name. It's usually Matilda, isn't it? But
Yeah.
it's very sweet, Rebecca
Yeah.
Tilly Fletcher. So Rebecca Tilly Fletcher, of course, your great-grandmother, was born in 1889 in Nottinghamshire to a shorthand clerk named Joseph Fletcher and a schoolmistress, Lizzie Goddard. So her parents were well-educated, middle class.
That makes so much sense.
Does it? Why do you say that?
My
Sally?
mother was a head teacher and was head of the year
Oh, wow.
a number of times, was one of the sort of fabled superheads. She was headmistress for 20 years of St Marylebone Girls' School in centre of London, and her mission was to give a public school education in the state sector. And so she turned this school around from being 300-400 people to being, outstanding in every category, an arts academy. And then when I had Ollie, had an eldest son with Down syndrome and autism, she set up a bridge school for autistic boys next to it. So she's properly one of the great headmistresses of the last 50 years, I think. I mean, I'm obviously biased, but even now, we go and do corporate awards and these amazing women come up to collect their award, and as they're going down they go, by the way, your mum was my head teacher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you see these women going out there and doing great things from that school. We're incredibly proud
and
of
it's
her.
fascinating, isn't it? This is what this podcast, I suppose, is all
Yeah.
about. So Laura, Rebecca married a man called Wilfred Johnson, didn't she?
That's right. And in the 1911 census, Rebecca is working at a psychiatric hospital. And that is where she meets Wilfred. They're both employed at the same hospital. So if you
Yeah.
look at the census record on Ancestry, you can
Yes.
see them both there at the same hospital several years before they were married. And then they get married in 1917.
Yeah.
And what I have to show you now is really very special because it is the marriage record of Rebecca Tilly Fletcher and Wilfred Johnson that has her original signature at the bottom.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
There's something special, isn't it,
There
about
is.
seeing your ancestors' handwriting?
Yes. Yeah,
It's
that's
so
not a million
moving.
miles off mine.
Really?
Yeah.
And you can just imagine the pen moving across the page in their hand on such an important day in their lives. Sometimes I sit there and look at a signature for ages just trying to picture what their lives were like and what that moment was like for them.
So she married a soldier.
She did, and this is right in the middle of World War One.
Yeah.
So he wasn't a full-time soldier?
He wasn't a career soldier, no.
No.
He signed
He
up
joined,
for the
yeah.
war.
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah.
And so did they have any children?
Good question.
Sorry, Sally, I'm so invested in your story now.
Yeah.
I'm asking the questions.
So it's a happy ending for Rebecca. Wilfred survives the war, thank
Yeah.
goodness. Many years later, there's another document
Yes.
that is created. It's called the 1939 Register.
Yes.
And this was created at the outbreak of the Second World War
Yeah.
to make a record of who would need to serve at home, who was eligible to go to war, and that sort of thing. And so this is a fantastic resource for family history because, like the census, it creates a snapshot of where everyone
Yes.
was during this pivotal time. And
Yeah.
your family, Rebecca Tilly Fletcher, your great-grandmother, is
Yeah.
on this document. And Wilfred is above her. And who's that below them?
Printer at school. Irving. Irving D. Johnson
They had a son.
at school.
So that means that Irving was May's
Brother.
half-sibling.
Yeah.
Half sibling. Yeah. Irving D. Johnson. She had a boy. Amazing. Amazing.
Have you come across the name Irving at
No.
all on your WhatsApp groups
No.
when you're researching? No.
No. No.
So
I
May had a
haven't.
brother. If you want to pick up this search now,
Yes.
what I would recommend that you do
Yeah.
is that you go onto Ancestry, you look up Irving, see if
Yeah.
you can find the marriage index for him, see who
Right.
he married,
Right.
see if you can find his death index record, find his children,
Right. Right.
and that's how you find your
Okay.
family.
You're on.
May's biological mother, Rebecca, who adopted out her daughter,
Which must have been horrible for her.
yeah, and then eventually
Ended up with
got
Yeah.
a
married
little boy.
and
Yeah.
had a little boy.
Yeah. That is wonderful to know that she was out there and she was okay.
Yeah.
And to know that the worst imaginings aren't true.
Yeah.
That my grandmother was loved.
And so
And-
how much of a relief, Sally, will this be to be able to give them the truth, actually, about May?
I think it'd be great. It'll be great. It's just a sort of slight worry because she hadn't said anything, and it's just sort of this background worry that she'd undergone some trauma, or because I wonder when John Kirby then got a grocer's shop. That was much later.
It must have been, yeah.
Must have been much later because there are some. We have managed to find some pictures of the cart of the shop with the horse and cart.
Yeah.
And we remember, obviously, the shop in Castleford. So, yeah, it's great to know that she was wanted, that she was loved, that Rebecca is out there. Who was the teacher? Rebecca was the teacher.
Rebecca's mum, Lizzie.
Rebecca's mum was the
Yeah,
teacher.
so that would be your
Yeah,
great-great-grandmother.
that explains so much.
Earlier on, you were talking about your granny May and
Yeah.
saying that there was this feeling that she might have been from a well-to-do family.
Yes.
And obviously we've unravelled a lot about
Yes.
her there.
Yeah.
But there was an uncle, wasn't there? That's quite interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, so while she wasn't from nobility per se,
Yes.
she did have an uncle, Rebecca's brother,
Yes.
who was considered to be marketing royalty.
Really?
He moved to New York,
Moved to New York.
yeah, and his name was Frank Irving Fletcher. And he
Right.
was massively famous during his
Really?
time, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and if you look him up in newspapers, he's all over the place. He was
Really?
considered really witty, really funny.
Really?
And he was, when he died, his death announcement described him as the world's most highly paid writer of advertisements.
Wow.
He was a huge success.
Wow.
And he wrote an autobiography
No.
called Lucid Interval.
Here you go, your
That's
next book.
funny. Lucid
I-
interval. I love that. The rest of it is not lucid. There's just a short interval of
Just that bit.
lucidity.
Feels like my life, to be honest.
Lucid interval.
Lucid Interval
How
by
amazing.
Frank Irving Fletcher.
So you can still buy it. Can't still be in print.
It's online, secondhand.
I've got a brother in marketing.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Amazing. And
So that
also,
runs in
in
the
fact,
family
there is a
too.
Smack the Pony sketch where we wrote together of me and Sarah Alexander in the back of a. Was it about marketing? I think we do kind of talk about marketing things, about how it's all, bullshit. Whatever you can say.
Beep.
Yeah, exactly. Beep, beep. Yeah.
But May
that.
wasn't completely deluded then. You know, she did have this man in her family
Yes.
that had done great things, and that was very famous. And, you know,
Yes.
so the hats were
It's
for
such
good
a-
reason.
It's such a shame that she was carrying all of that, wasn't it? It's just, there's absolutely no shame in being adopted. She contributed so much to the community, and it was such a figure in our family.
But it's interesting now that you've heard all of May's backstory. And now you know what the facts are surrounding the adoption. How do you feel now compared to how you felt on the day of her funeral when that bit of information was
Yes.
new to the family?
Yes. Really relieved. I feel really relieved. And I feel quite excited. I feel sort of comforted deep down. And I love the fact that she wanted to be on the birth certificate, that she was reluctant. It seems like she was reluctant to give her up. I'm happy that it turned out okay for her.
And who is the first person that you will tell about the revelations that you found out about today?
Well, I think I'm probably just going to put it straight on the
group.
Wheeldon group chat. And any documents you have, I'll just connect. Everyone's going to be so, I think they're going to feel like I do, so relieved that there is nothing bad, and excited that there are other relatives to find, and that there's an autobiography to buy.
Yes.
Lucid intervals. That's hilarious.
Guess what you're buying all of your family,
of the
for,
family
Christmas.
for Christmas,
I mean,
yeah.
it's sorted very early on in the year, which is perfect. And Sally, does it make you feel differently, you personally,
I
about
think it
the
does.
family?
I don't know, it's like, I guess if you find out that something really awful in your background, you sort of go looking inside yourself for, I don't know,
Of
genetic
course.
memories or something, and to feel that there was love all the way down is like a really nice, comforting thing.
And you know those myths in our family history, you know,
Yeah.
where we sort of fill the gaps ourselves
Yes.
without really knowing.
Yes, exactly.
And the fact that some of the family didn't want to dig in to
Yes.
May's history because of the adoption.
Yes.
Are you glad that you have? And what would your advice be to other families who are facing the same sort of dilemma?
Well, I think you've got to be respectful to the people who are alive. So it was important to be respectful to my aunts who didn't at that time want to, because it was their mum and they were a bit closer. But I feel, our generation all really wanted to know. We were desperate to know. And you're just interested in where you came from, especially as you get older, aren't you? Like, who am I? Yeah. And I'm going to be, is that thing as you get older, a friend of mine described it to me as like being in a swimming relay race, and the person, you're going in next. What was this all about?
Yeah.
What was this all about? What am I leaving behind me? What's this thing flowing through me? What is it? What are these characteristics? What are we for? Those kind of unanswerable questions. But it just feels interesting.
It does.
In a way it really didn't when I was younger.
And that's the thing. At some point, our ancestors will be looking at our marriage certificates at the census. It's funny to think that, isn't it?
Yes.
But at least now you have a
Yeah.
fuller picture.
Yeah.
Sally, thank you so much.
Thank
Hopefully
you.
you've had a lot out of that.
I have.
Laura,
thank you so much.
fantastic.
Yeah,
thank you ever so much as well. And just lovely to fill some gaps for
Yeah,
you.
thank you. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you for trusting me with it.
So that's it for our very first episode of Questions and Ancestors. Now, if you've been inspired by Sally's journey and her grandmother's, then you can start a 14-day free trial at ancestry.co.uk and start searching your own family history. We'd love you to follow us on your favourite podcast platform. Please do leave us a comment or a review, as it helps others to find us and maybe start their own genealogy journey. Questions and Ancestors is being brought to you by Ancestry. Now, I'm sorry, but you can't host a podcast about family ancestry and sit next to a genealogist without asking them to do a little bit of digging into my family. So if it's okay with you, Laura, at the end of each episode, I'll ask you to have a little look at the Jones family. Genuine question, though, to start off. How hard is it to look at the history of a Jones family in Wales?
It's very challenging. It's not impossible, but it's very challenging. And the reason for this is that there are certain parts of the UK where there are highly localised surnames.
Okay.
And Wales, really as a country, has a lot of highly localised surnames. So you've got your Joneses, you've got your Evanses, Hughes. And
Well, Mum was an Evans, her
Yeah,
maiden name.
there
So we
you go.
cover all bases.
Yeah. And so even if you manage to get beyond a Jones ancestor and you hit a different surname line, you'll often run into the same issue where the surname is ubiquitous. And so then if, for example, you have two different Mary Joneses in the same area, the same age, it can be really hard to tell which one is your ancestor. And so that's when you really have to start digging down into the details in the records in order to figure out which one is your Mary Jones.
Okay, well, I like to give you a challenge, you see, Laura.
Well, thank you.
Now, one of the questions we've always had as a family is what happened to my great-grandfather on my paternal side, because there was a very sudden demise, but we don't really know about the circumstances that surround it. So I wondered whether you'd found anything out about that.
So in 1923, Louis got married to your great-grandmother, and they had two children together, one of them being
My grandfather.
your grandfather, Denzel.
Denzel.
So they had two children together, Denzel and Norma.
Yes.
And then those children were still very, very young when, as you say, Louis suddenly died.
Oh, gosh.
And so the document we're going to look at together is a newspaper article about the incident.
No way. Where on earth did you find this?
It's this one here.
Oh, God, fell dead in street Llanelli man's collapse after visit to mother. A young Llanelli tin plater died within tragic suddenness. Just after paying a visit to his mother's home, he was Louis Jones of Panteg, Felinfole, and his mother lived at Old Castle Road, Llanelli. He had left his mother's house and was walking along Old Castle Road when he was seen to fall. People who saw him fall ran to his assistance, but they found that he was dead. Oh gosh, it appears that he'd not been in the best of health for some time and had not been able to follow his employment at the Old Castle Tin Plate Works. He leaves a wife and two children. He was 34 years of age. Gosh, so he was 34. No mention of a cinema in there anywhere. That's really young, isn't it?
Yeah, and it would have been so shocking for his family because even though he'd been in poor health, so it's interesting that it mentions he'd been ill for a long time and had been struggling to work. So the family would already have been struggling financially before Louis died. And it's interesting that it mentions that, but even in that situation, it would have been so shocking for him to suddenly die like this. They would have expected perhaps for him to get more ill or to end up in hospital, but not to suddenly drop down in the street.
No.
So this would have been devastating for his wife and the little children.
Now, interestingly, it doesn't say, you know, what was wrong with him, but I suppose the newspaper wouldn't know that. Do you know if it was cardiac related? Is there any record of that at all?
So when you want to get more information about that sort of thing, you can go on Ancestry and it has something called the Birth, Marriage and Death Indexes.
Okay.
And these are indexes of all civil registration records going back from the present day all the way to 1837.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so you can use that information to obtain a full death certificate, and that would then get you the information about whether or not he died of a cardiac related issue.
Because I'm obsessed with ECGs now, because it's something that's, I mean, I shouldn't even laugh about it. It's not even funny, but I think it's something that runs through Dad's side of the family. I remember Auntie Norma very well. She used to always buy us a massive selection box, and Mum used to hate it because Mum was obsessed with her teeth when we were little. So Auntie Norma was like, oh my God, Auntie Norma's coming, watch out. And Mum would quickly squirrel away all this chocolate before she got it to us. And my grandfather talked quite a lot, I suppose, about his dad and then subsequently, you know, the family situation after his dad died. I think his mum was called Emma. Am I right? Or am I mixing her up with a cat?
Let's have a look
Which
at
is
your
an awful
family
thing
tree.
to say. But my great-grandmother was alive when I was little. She lived until she was 96, which is quite incredible, I suppose, for that time.
Yeah,
but
so
was she called Emma?
She was called Florence Emma Hughes.
There you go.
And it's Hughes, of course. So another classic surname.
It's funny as a little child, isn't it? You just pick up on little nuggets, but that's something that I remember. I remember the Florence now and the Emma. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the cat had the same name.
She did. Emma the cat. Emma the great-grandmother.
It's a shame cats aren't included on the census, really.
Well, I mean, then we'd be there for hours. Thank you so much, Laura. That is so interesting. First little nugget and I'm hooked. I mean, I just absolutely love hearing these bits and pieces about my family. It's such a treat. So thank you so much.
Of course, and we'll look into why Louis Jones had such an unusual name. More on that next time.
It's very French. Ooh la la.